So greens, this is not a color mixing course. I do talk about it in the course, but I do have greens in my palette. I typically mix my greens from yellows and blues and reds because you have way more control, especially for trying to find nuanced color that feels right. There's very few greens that come out of a tube that look at all realistic or at all like something in nature. They're usually very strong, very high chroma, very saturated, and very, very intense. And greens in nature are often closer to grays and browns than they are bright greens. So I'm just making some puddles here just as a starting place. I'm going to get a variety of greens going. So I've got warm yellow, warm meaning closer towards orange, cool yellow, closer towards green, and then I've got cool and warm blue. And so I'm just going to mix, like I said, a few things so I have some variety to choose from. I'm not even looking at my reference right now. I'm just getting some color mixed. And from here, I will look at my reference and figure out where I want to be. And I don't care if I'm intermixing my things. Nothing in here is super vivid, bright color, high chroma color. So everything is going to be a little bit more towards gray anyways. It doesn't matter a lot that how I'm mixing these colors. I'm going to have a lot of overlap. If you're unfamiliar mixing color, you can always test swatches and compare them. If you're going to do that, it's nicest to test on the edge and hold it right up next to what you're looking at. And so I can, these are only yellow and blue. I'm most certainly going to be adding some red into these, so it's not quite so bright, but we'll see. Make myself a little red puddle. And it does not matter which red I use. I have a warm and cool. This happens to be my cool red. It does not matter in this case because none of these are super bright, vivid colors. So I kind of I want to find my value, remember, because we're doing value shape. Value is most important. And yellows are typically yellows are the lightest value you're going to see. In watercolor, we're not going to get any darker than how a pigment comes out of the tube. So if out of the tube, this is the value of my color, I can't, if I think something is yellow, but it's a lot darker than that, then it's not actually this yellow. There's something else in there darkening it. It might be, really it's all red, yellow, blue. So there's going to be some red and some blue in with that yellow to help get the darker value. And so with my greens, this is probably also going to happen that I can't get dark enough to get my dark values to come out with these particular pigments. I could pull in neutral tint. I don't like to do that. I usually use blue with blues are usually where the darkest values are, blues and violets in particular, but I don't usually use a lot of violet from the tube. I use mostly red, yellow, blue. I said I wasn't going to talk about color. I'm going off. Sorry, losing track of what I'm actually trying to do here. This looks pretty close. It's nice and earthy. I might start here. I'm just going to work left to right, and I'm going to articulate the tops of this shape. And again, this is maybe closer to how I would paint if I were doing something in plein air. So if I was working on location, where I have a limited amount of time and I want to capture the sense of this place. Again, there's no value being added into these right now. This is just one color, one value. It is pretty close to the correct value that I'm seeing there. Close enough that it's fine for conveying what I'm trying to convey. I'm not trying to be exact in my shapes, but I'm trying to be consistent with the kind of shapes I see here. So they're not all uniform, right? The branches are not all the same. They're not all going the same direction. There's going to be clumps because remember, branches are coming towards us and away from us at all angles. And I'm working pretty fluidly. I have a nice puddle here that I'm pulling from. So right now, this first tree is still a little bit damp and I am paying attention to that. This is going very fast. This is not something like, don't ever watch somebody else paint and think that you're supposed to paint that same way. I mean, we do that subconsciously. We've got the copycat, monkey see, monkey do kind of thing as humans, where we watch something and then we innately try to copy the thing that we see happening. I'm going to shortcut a little bit in the sake of time, and instead of doing red, yellow, blue, I'm going to bring some brown in. This is a burnt umber. I love burnt umber and French ultramarine together. They make a fairly dark, not inky dark, not like a 10 value, but pretty dark. And I can lean it towards warm with more brown or lean it towards cool with more blue. So Interior shadows are often a little bit warmer. So I'm going to lean it a little bit towards the brown for a little warmth. And while this is, I think, still just wet enough, I'm going to just drop a little bit of darkness where I see the underside of some of these branches. And hopefully, at least in some areas, my paint is still damp enough that this will blend out and give me a value range that feels reasonably believable or consistent with what I'm seeing. And here it's dry. So here I'm just getting dark on light. If it's dry, I can place those shapes, rinse my brush out, and I can just set some water on top and soften the tops of those shapes. And this is if I'm working very fast. So this is if we were to call this a study, it's very detailed, and it's not, you'll see in the course, it's not how I would do a study at all. A study is going to be my 1-inch brush, very blocky, capturing the main abstract shapes. This is not main abstract shapes. We're getting into plenty of detail here, but I just want to, again, like this is more like a plein air style. It's a quicker approach to conveying the sense of this. I do need to watch my time. So I'm just going, these are going to get a little bit blockier because I'm trying to go faster. That's maybe where I would like to handle it, but I want to get through this for you. So I'm going to speed up. Speeding up just means my shapes are going to be a little less carefully articulated, but I can still get the direction of the shape. So I'm seeing this angle in this tree back here. And yeah, my branches don't look exactly the same, but the placement of the outside edge, I'm trying to be the same, and the angle I'm trying to be the same. So I'm giving you the sense of what's happening there without giving you all of the information. And here, again, just trying to drop in a little bit of a value variation. And if my main green that I was using is too wet still, like this is, those darks spread and kind of fill, so that all got a little bit darker than I would have wanted, I can dry my brush out and soak some of that back up. It's a little darker, but actually overall it works, it fits well enough, close enough. So something that I sometimes do in some of the live workshops we will paint something, like a quick value study, and we'll get into more detail, and maybe we'll do a few different levels of detail with the same subject. And if your values are accurate and your main shapes are accurate, you can have a very loose 3-value study, and you can have a very detailed full value painting and hold the two side by side from across a room. They will look the same. They will read the same because the main value structure is the same. So if you make those shapes small enough, like all the way across a room, they will read the same. And so that's why value is so important. We've got some flexibility on the size of shapes, how much we represent detail or not, because let's face it, if you're looking at a landscape and looking at the far distance, you're not seeing the details of any of the trees at all. It's just a massive green that has slight value variation. Well, what is that slight value variation? What are those shapes? Are they vertical? Are they horizontal? If you're representing that close enough, it's going to feel right. Okay, so I'm halfway across. I'm going to just start with this area to make sure that I can kind of complete one area before we're out of time. I said I would add something extra in here. So what I'm going to do is show what I do in my large studio paintings. When I get into very complex subjects like this, where it's easy to lose track, especially a large painting where I have a ton of this kind of subject going on, these styles of low contrast value shapes, it can be really hard to track where you are and to have the overall sense still feel right. And so if you draw things in and you work lighter to darker, you lose your pencil lines, right? They disappear into those mid values. So I will use my neutral tint, usually a little bit on the lighter side. Because watercolor is transparent, we will see those lower layers showing through. So I can take my neutral tint and I can find these darkest darks, and I can kind of map in what those shapes look like. Now, if you try this, the thing to be aware of is neutral tint is staining. It will not move, which is why it works for this. I can paint layers on top and it's not going to shift, become muddy, blend into those upper layers of pigment, any of that kind of stuff. It stays put. but it stays put. So if it's not where you want it, if you put it down in a way that you're unhappy with, you're out of luck. It's going to be there forever. So it's worth really slowing down if you haven't done a lot of work with staining pigments like that, or you're not super confident with your drawing or your painting. It's worth sometimes really slowing down for something. If that's not you and you don't want to have to slow down for something, this might not be your approach, and that's very okay. I used to try to do this with other things, like I've done the burnt umber and ultramarine, but those don't work well because they're lifting pigments. And I learned the hard way that if you're not real careful with how you put those upper layers on, it'll all mix together and you get a little bit of a muddier, more opaque texture, which there's nothing wrong with that. I just didn't like it. And it certainly doesn't work if I show at the Transparent Watercolor Society of America show when I get accepted, and they don't allow things that have that look. So I've learned to be a little more careful. Okay, so if you notice what I was doing there, I was looking at those darks. Remember from the value study we did before, how some of these, the darkest darks, we're seeing this kind of more horizontal movement. I didn't do every single one. I'm kind of blocking in rough placement of them so I can find my way through, make sure I'm in the right place here. I'm looking at this tree, stands out just a little bit. There's some darker darks. I think I'm in the right place. If not, I will have just moved this tree. I'm wanting to go fast for you, so I'm not taking the time I would sometimes take. And again, speed comes with repetition. So the more you do the same kinds of thing, make the same kinds of shape, the faster it is to do it again, and the faster you see those shapes accurately. It takes a good while to get to that place. You take your time. If you're trying to get something really careful and accurate, trying to do it fast is not going to be the way to do it. There's plenty of times that I work very carefully and very slowly and with purpose on a section that I want to turn out a certain way. I know I need to not just, have fun and get into it and start. I don't know what just happened. Those shapes look wrong. Maybe my drawing was off. I think I added some trees. That's okay. Talking and painting does interesting things. Okay, we'll also call that note. Maybe I want a little bit more here. I'm kind of trying to remember to squint and see where my darkest darks are so I get them where I want them. This was here a little bit. Okay, and then I can show you what purpose that was for. All right, probably doesn't look like much right now, except kind of a polka dotty thing. Come back in and make more of this. I liked, that was pretty close. That's my warm yellow and warm blue. It seemed pretty close. When I get into this area, I'm probably going to start mixing in a little bit more color variety, just so it feels less exactly homogeneous, because it's not. In fact, right in here, I've got some lighter middle values. I made this a little bit more yellow maybe than it is. And now I can just go over this whole area is really pretty dark. I'm going to bring this middle value green that I had made all the way down through here. You see how that neutral tint still shows through. And it kind of starts to begin to build a sense of texture in there, even though it was really pretty quick. And now while that's wet, because it's not quite dark enough as some of the areas I see here, that's going to take a little while to dry. Actually, I might leave that go on for just a minute. There's this tree in front. I am not going to take the time to articulate exactly that tree. If this were a studio painting, I might really work on some of the branches here because this is closer to us and we can see a little bit more detail. I'm not going to make it look like the whole tree is exactly articulated. It's just where I can see some of the branches that are picking up more light on the tips. I would make sure I get some of that, probably a little bit of that through here, a little bit through here, and the rest I would let look the way I'm handling it here. I like handling things in a variety of ways like that because it's closer to how we observe. In real life, we're not looking at the full detail of everything all at once. Our eyes move through a scene or over a subject, and we pick up on different detail in different areas as we're looking through. And we get this sense that we've seen everything and seen all the details. of the subject when really we haven't. We've slowed down in a few areas and our brain is just kind of filling in the difference, interpolating what else is around. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is look at this. I know I've got more to go, but I'm not worried. I'd rather get one area pretty good to show you what I'm thinking. So I'm here. This is still wet. I could still work in here very easily and let those colors and values blend to get this look. What I'm seeing is I am too high contrast. This is mostly light and dark. There's a little bit of middle value. What I'm seeing here, the whole thing is darker. My lightest values are not this light. I'm still too light in there. And this area, there's a lot more darkness and depth pulling this further back. So I've got my neutral tint that is showing me roughly the location of those darkest darks, but there's a lot of almost as dark darks all around it that I don't have. So let's mix a darker, something in the green family, but I need to be darker than what I was just working with, which was these two pigments. So if I want to be darker, I probably need to add some of that red in there because the red and blue makes that violet that will make it a little darker. And I probably can still get a pretty good green. I know I can because this is what I do, even though I've added that red in there. So just so you can see what that's going to look like. It's a very kind of earthy green. So I'm looking through here. Again, I don't want to do a lot of detail, but there is some value variation. So I'm not just going to paint this as one solid shape. I am going to paint around where I see a little bit of a lighter, kind of these clumpy lumps of, you know, the shrubby nature of this tree, or where the trees all come together and it's a complex, chaotic lump of shapes. I'm looking at what I actually see happening in those shapes. It doesn't matter whether, I don't want to think about it as tree again, because that will make me start to do things that aren't what I see happening. I just want to make shapes that I see happening through here. In this area, I do want to keep that lighter. It's a little bit too light, but if I add a tiny bit of detail, a little bit of texture, when you add small dark shapes on top of a lighter shape, you are effectively darkening that overall shape. It's like if you've seen stippling, little dots or hatching lines that can be used to indicate value. When you put lines or dots or shapes next to each other, the closer they get, the darker it looks, the more they're spaced apart. Your brain is just kind of combining or blending those darks and lights together. And so I can get a little bit of texture in here. And notice I did, yes, I'm pretty fast because I do this a lot, but that wasn't really intensive, careful painting to imply texture through there. What I was making sure I did is staying true to the style of shape I see. So rounded, square, horizontal, vertical, angled, those kinds of things, those abstract shapes. It would take me a lot more time to make this tree look the way I would like to make it look. So I know I'm going to be largely unhappy with that, and it's okay. This is what happens to me when I do plein air work. It's part why I don't usually like to share it publicly, because I always expect it to look like my studio work, and of course it's not going to. Studio work is, for me, hours and hours of loving on the subject and getting all sorts of nuance and detail. So this is not an exact representation. It's close. It's very close. But there's lots of things in here that I am very quickly making judgments and simplifying because we're on a little time crunch, just as if I was working outdoors. Now, what I'm going to start to make sure I'm not doing, since this is not exactly the same anyways, the tendency we have is to make patterns. We tend to make patterns out of things. So the tendency is to accidentally make every single branch or every single indication of these clumps of needles look the same, where they're all the same width, they're all the same depth, they're all spaced apart the same amount. I don't want that because that's not realistic at all. That's not what the sense of this is. So I'm going to come in and make sure that I'm breaking up the shape in there very irregularly, or irregularly enough, which, little bonus tip, if you have a reference photo and you happen to get a tree that looks very perfect, be careful, because if you paint it just the way it looks and you do an excellent job, if it looks too perfect, it's going to look wrong
it's time for a Q&A. And first and foremost, do you have a few moments for Q&A, Jessica?
Oh
Because
yeah,
we've been here for a bit.
absolutely. Absolutely.
The first question that I remember in my head, and please, everyone who is here, if you're already here having questions, write them in the chat because I might have missed some because there has been so many comments now and I've been so focused on different things. So please write your questions in the chat if they have not been answered yet. And the one that I remember is what brush were you painting with? The one with the red handle, I think,
Oh, that one,
red brown.
it's a Princeton Velvet Touch Long Round. These are a newer find for me, and I'm a fan of them because the brush is longer. Let's see. Like this is a different brand, similar with brush, but you see how much longer the red one is? I like that because the body holds more paint in it when you're painting, and so you can work longer before you have to recharge the brush. They have a nice point, they last pretty well, and they're not super expensive. So I've been pretty happy with those for now. I'm always, I mean, materials
Yeah.
don't make the artist, right? There's so many things out there and we all like different things. If you can afford it, try different stuff. If not, there's plenty of less expensive options that work really well. And if it works for you, you don't have to use the same thing somebody else uses.
So true. And then we had a question in the beginning which I really loved because it's from Maya and it can be very hard when we watch someone else's work. And
Yeah,
let's take a look at this one for instance. The question is, beautiful work, do you use white at all, like for the mist or the highlights?
sure. Very, very, very rarely at this point. If white comes out, um, I'm not opposed to using white by any means. I do certain shows where you're not allowed to use white, and so it became a thing I challenged myself with some years ago is to just not. I do use masking fluid some. That comes with different challenges. This particular painting, trying to remember, if I used masking fluid, it would have been for the highlighted edge of those logs and a few of the branches coming out, and that would be it. Nowhere else would I have used masking on that. Um, there's nothing wrong with it. If I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, we're trying to make a good painting. So if using some white or another opaque pigment is going to make your painting better, go for it. There's plenty of paintings I did that I mean, I could tell you stories of things that ended up in very major shows that I had to like redoing one rock 26 times for painting that got into the American Watercolor Society. I was so unhappy. It was ridiculous. Um, so typically I don't anymore. And the masking fluid, just to give you another little tip, because I have it here. The masking fluid I like is Pebeo. It's Pebeo is the brand name. They have it, you can buy the like little jars of it and use it with a brush or whatever tool you like. They also make these pens and they have them in two different diameters. I like masking fluid for some things, but it comes with some real downsides. It makes a very hard, sharp edge, and it has it's viscous, so it has a certain amount of surface tension, so you will get these rounded edges. So if you're doing like grasses and you want a sharp point and you've used masking fluid, if you want to get that sharp point, you have to go back in and paint darks or whatever the background is around each of those ends of the blades to get that shape. So I mean, if you really want to, it can work for that. I used to do that because I didn't feel confident in handling it a different way. And I thought it was a time saver, not a time saver, because I was going back in and fixing all of these things or changing all these things. Um, but it's a good tool if it works for you.
We have another couple of tool questions, and the first one is, what watercolor paper do you usually use? Is it hot, cold press, smooth, rough? And do you have a favorite brand that works for
Yeah,
your style?
I am usually on 140-pound cold press, usually Arches,
Yeah.
partly because I bought a huge roll for some of the sizes I like to do. That's the only brand that makes it that
Ah,
large.
yeah.
And I stretch my paper is how I get it to not work. Not today's
Mm,
demo, I didn't stretch that.
no.
But I stretch my paper. If you're interested, I have instructions on how I stretch paper on my website. There's a materials page that I go into way too much detail. And there's like a 40-minute long video about all of the materials and all of your options because some people want to know all of that.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. There's so much stuff out there.
And Arches is very good for many layers, so I that was my guess.
Yeah, it's a good durable. paper. There's lots of other good brands. Fabriano is a good brand. I do use Fabriano some too. There's others that I have because I've intended to play with them, and I just never end up with time to play or experiment because I'm
Ah,
very busy.
yeah,
I intend to. I've got the
yeah.
materials for it, and I might find something I love even more, and I would absolutely switch if I did.
Wonderful. And then we have another paper question from Sung. Uh, do you ever use tinted watercolor paper? And if so, when would you do that?
I haven't. I've not heard of tint. Are you tinting like? Does it come pre-tinted, or
I
do you
would
tint it
I would
yourself?
guess that it is pre-tinted, and then you would
I've not
probably
seen
need to
it.
use opaque lighter
Yeah,
colors.
that might make some really cool effects. I've not used it. I've not even seen that before.
Wonderful. And then Jadranka asks, do you usually start with the dark values and then apply lighter color over like during this demo?
Yeah, so I don't have an usual.
No.
I have had usuals in the past. I used to have kind of like formulaic, not quite, but approaches I would do kind of the same way every time. And over the years, what I've learned about myself is some approaches don't suit my mood on that day. And then it becomes miserable to spend a day trying to force myself to, I've got a deadline coming, I've got 2 weeks to get there. I have to work a strong full day, but I'm not in the mood and it's awful. So I've learned to paint the way I'm feeling and to kind of identify and see that. And it depends on lots of things. So some days I feel more confident than other days. If I'm feeling more confident, I will sometimes jump to finished values right out of, on the first layer, and I'm working things a certain way. Other times I might feel more timid and I'll approach a little bit more gradually, like I'm not quite sure where I want those values to end up, or I feel uncertain that I'm going to handle this and have it look the way I want it to look. So I'll kind of sneak up on the values. I'll start a little bit lighter and build more layers. Sometimes I build layers because that's the look I want. Sometimes I specifically do 1 or 2 layers because that's the look that I want. Um, Kind of just varies. I do like what I showed you today with putting some of that neutral tint in to block in the dark values. That's a something I kind of figured out, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. And I do really like that. I do a lot of larger paintings, and especially when I have a whole hillside and I want that feel, but I don't want to spend forever on every single shape. It's a time saver for me to kind of block in pretty quickly what those basic dark shapes are going to be. Helps me track where I am in the reference as I'm painting in those areas. And it, builds some of the value before you're even going, but I don't always do that. Sometimes I'll take a hillside and I'll do the lightest values first and then gradually build towards the darkest. It's kind of what I feel like and what the image looks like. Because sometimes some references it just hits different, or I feel like I'm seeing those shapes in a different way.